Nowadays, when you pay your taxes, it's done in several ways. Either you get a bill at the end of the tax year, or it comes out of your paycheck before you even see it. Of course, this level of bureaucratic sophistication didn't exist during the medieval period, which raises the question, how were medieval taxes actually collected? How did a ruler extract taxes from their subjects, and what sort of things were subject to tax? Well, across Europe, many states had varying levels of centralisation which affected how taxes were collected. One state which spanned thousands of miles and also the entire medieval period was the Eastern Roman Empire, often called the Byzantine Empire, and the one we'll focus on. This is because it was a well-developed state with both a large urban and rural population. So how were these taxes actually collected? Well, to everyone's surprise, the people who bore the brunt of taxation were the peasantry, and there were two major forms of taxation in the Byzantine Empire. The first was rent, which a peasant paid to their local lord in return for the right to use land, and the second was the telumenon, the household tax which was paid to the central government. Rent was based upon the value and productivity of the land in question and for the most part was determined by the lord. The household tax was determined by central tax collectors who would travel across the empire and take inventory of who had what. The tax collectors would then leave and come back soon after to collect the demanded taxes, and the responsibility lay with the lord to make sure it was paid. Both the tax collectors and the lord would then make a note of how much was paid and who paid it to make sure that taxes weren't collected twice, and off they'd go. Now, there were three ways in which peasants could pay their taxes. The first was simply in coin, the second was in kind, like handing over the equivalent value of their produce, and the third was via unpaid labour, and this was used for things like the construction of public roads or churches. In case you're wondering, the nobility and the clergy were given what were called privileges, which reduced their tax burden. All of this makes it sound like the Byzantine Empire was simply able to tax the peasantry up to the hilt, but they did have protections. The government knew that an unhappy, unproductive peasantry would destabilise the empire, which is why there were limitations on how much they could be taxed in regular peacetime. That said, in times of war, and war was quite common, special taxes could be levied. The most egregious of these were the farm levy, an extra tax on farmland, and the seizure of church property, mostly its gold reserves. And this was a right in which all Byzantine emperors held because legally the entire empire was their personal property and everyone else only held it with their permission. It wasn't just the peasantry who was subject to taxation. Another major revenue stream for the empire was taxation on merchants and their trade. Unlike the taxation of the peasantry, local nobles weren't included and it was the sole purview of the central government. And so to summarise, that's how the Byzantine government would collect its taxes, via state-paid bureaucrats who travelled the empire to assess land values and levy a tax accordingly. The lords of the peasantry in question would then be required to collect the taxes and pay the next time that the collectors were about. Whilst the level of taxation varied depending on trade, location and era, one thing was consistent: nobody liked paying them. I hope you enjoyed this episode and thank you for watching, with the special thanks to my Patreon supporters who you can see on screen here. And with an extra special thanks to James Bisonet, David Archaeologist, Party Boyko, Danny Maloney, Colin Castleman, Rob Waterhouse, Aaron the White, Michael Reynolds, Urchwayan Emperor, Chris Wicker, Gustav Swan, Gareth Turner, Spinning Three Plates, David Silverman, Winston Kaywood, Maggie Pakskowski, Christian Cheke, Anthony Beckett, Robert Wetzel, Sky Chappelle and Ike.